Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Data Revolution podcast. Welcome back to previous guest Gladwin Mendez. It's great to have you here, Gladwin.
Great to be back on your podcast, Kate. It's always a pleasure.
So what are we going to be talking about today?
Look, I think it's a very topical point impacting organizations, employees, and our communities, which is very much the uplift of capability. And look, I'll talk about when we'll dive into capability uplift in data, and of course, the elephant in the room and AI. And I think those go hand in hand in today. Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
I'm really interested to have this conversation because many people are starting to think about this in a really serious way now. There was a very recent report by Jobs and Skills Australia, which was about our Gen AI transition and the implications for work and skills, and I'll share that in the show notes. But we need to start to think about what different kinds of roles we need in the organisation. And I think that is something that we need to do pretty quickly. We need to get our skates on now because this thing is real.
Look, I 100% agree, Kate. You have to take it from, and as a board director myself, it's what the ethical values and vision of the board directors are, what the strategy is of the organization to evolve with this. When I'm done my data and AI strategies in the past, I always had a very close focus on customer experience and very closely evolved and linked that to employee experience. And to your point is, look, things are going to change. AI is not going to go away. What can we do as directors, as C-suite executives at the end of the day to ready our employees and our communities for this, to uplift their capability in data and AI at the end of the day, to enable them, all right? Imagine at the end of the day, we contrast the approaches taken by certain organizations to lay people off, right? I think that's the elephant in the room that everyone is terrified about, laying people off, right, Kate? And the excuse of AI, either directly or indirectly because of extensive investment in AI potentially not delivering. So look, we've got to cut our costs. So what can be done at the end of the day to uplift the capability, redeploy people, and not lose that unique, amazing institutional knowledge and experience at the end of the day?
I think the world is sort of splitting into two camps. Might be a bit simplistic, maybe there's a few more. But largely speaking, there are the countries who are going to take an attitude that we just take all the jobs out, save all the money, to hell with society and the impacts of this on society and the economy. And that is one way of thinking of things. I'm looking at you, USA. And then there's other countries who are trying to think about how we integrate AI into our society effectively so that it's a corporate good citizen, perhaps. And I know which side I fall on, the latter.
Look, I think we're very closely aligned with that. I've always told executives, I've always told the people I work with that AI is here to enhance people. Cutting down those non-value added activities shouldn't be a reason why you have jobs at the end of the day. Look, I'll balance that out in the sense that there are some American companies that are taking what I feel is the right approach. Walmart, but happy to share that link with you, where Walmart is specifically looking at how it can enhance employees, become more data and AI driven to enhance employee and customer experience and redeploying people. The CEO has actually come on going, look, it will impact people, but we're looking at redeploying people, upskilling people. We'll go into that into more detail around the upskilling aspect and processes. But there are some companies, and I think those are the companies at the end of the day, people like buying from people. People want to ensure at the end of the day that's not impacting their communities. So people will buy from organizations that, hey, look, at a board level, they've got those ethical values and they're driving that all the way through from the board level down.
I think that's a really important thing to think about it in terms of organisational values, because you've got a board of directors who kind of set the strategy and set the direction for the organisation and the values driven, and then management are working to execute against that. So it's an important thing to be thinking about. And I think a lot of us tend to not be thinking about these little decisions that we make in the business as being connected up to strategy in a consistent way, which is really an a challenging thing to do in an organization. I've been in an organization where I've been in the C-suite, working with the top level of the organization, and you go out to the frontline staff and they don't even know you've got a strategy, and you've been beavering around this strategy for years and stuff, and they just go, "What are you talking about? What strategy? I don't know about it."
But yes, you're spot on, Kate, and that neatly goes into what I would say is so critical as part of the strategy is from the board, most senior leadership standpoint. And if you think of like government, for example, it's the government ministers and so on. It is them having that view and that vision and the strategy of a certain view of things and ensuring it the back of that vision, that strategy is clearly communicated through change management. Like exactly like you said, it's like when frontline staff don't understand, oh my gosh, there's a strategy around this, and especially something as potentially polarizing as AI. It's so critical that your vision, your strategy as a senior leader is communicated and is translated all the way through the various divisions and departments and essentially going, so what? And what does this mean for you from the top down to frontline staff? So I 100% agree. If you think of that key pillar of strategy, it's so critical.
I think it's interesting to start to think about the different kind of personas that we're going to have with AI. And I think that there is a really interesting paper out of the UK government late last year, that has some really good information in that. And I like their three personas. So I've got it up on the screen here. So they've got AI citizens. So these are people who are making use of AI in the course of their daily life and their work. And then there's AI workers, are the ones whose role is outside of data and AI. So they're not building AI, but they're using it to do their jobs. And then there's AI professionals, the kind of people who work in data and AI space who build new AI things for organizations. So I think they're three really good categorizations for people to consider the impacts of those three groups.
And look, I'll take it one step further, right? Is there has recently been an MIT study that came out, an independent MIT study that said that, what was it, 75%, or sorry, even higher, I think it was 95% of organizations have not seen a bottom line impact to the ROI. And yes, I know there have been subsequent studies that have come out, but I also kind of query them because they've been done in conjunction with consulting firms. So it's always the look, what's in it for this organization providing this view? I think we'll probably sit in the middle. Anyone who's used AI knows that there is great value in it and it helps cut down some of those non-value added activities. But what I would almost say as a foundational aspect is the data under it and the data understanding, the data capability and education of employees at the end of the day. If you don't have that foundation, it makes AI even harder to understand. The old adage of garbage in, garbage out. And if you didn't understand that with basic data, now AI is going to accelerate some of these challenges. And I think those are one of the many things that are contributing to outcomes which are very negative from AI or not making a difference at a bottom line level.
It's really, this just made me think about an earlier conversation that I was having with a chap called James Price, and he's really keen on getting information assets valued, so that we can take proper care of them and report them to management and the board. And this has been something that people have been talking to me about since the 90s, because I remember last century. So if we assume that data or information is an asset, then it should have a value that is replicated in the balance sheet, you would
Exactly,
think.
I agree.
But that's really hard to do, and we haven't done it yet. But increasingly now with AI, with it feeding in to driving real tangible outputs, it seems to be an increasingly important thing to consider.
Look, certainly, I think and to that point, the exact point you've mentioned around it being on the balance sheets, I've had those sort of discussions with my CDAO executive counterparts for holy smoke, 5, 10 years of having those discussions around it should be on the balance sheet. People say no, it shouldn't. Well, goodwill used to be
Yeah,
a
that's
challenge
there.
and one that went onto the balance sheet, and now that's included, right? And if you can quantify goodwill, that should be an exercise in data is sort of tangible. It is challenging in the sense that it can be easily replicated and so on. So, like, how do you put a value to it? But certainly, if you're talking about it as an asset, you have to maintain it, you have to govern it, just like a tractor or a critical piece of equipment. It is critical. So you have to invest in it. That comes from the tone at the top, and when leaders are data driven, everyone follows too. So, aligning to that strategic view, you've got leaders who are talking about managing data. It's an asset, and you see them using data in their everyday life. I think people automatically get educated. They see how it's being used and they naturally follow through. And that also aligns with AI too.
Well, one of the interesting things that we're doing at my place is starting to think about what kind of baseline education everybody needs, an introduction to data and AI. And, we're starting to flesh out the change process around that and to implement some AI. And it's really interesting going through and thinking about that. I was having a meeting with our risk and privacy people this morning, and it's saying we need you in the mix too, because they need to understand the privacy and risk implications of what they're doing with AI, with data and AI.
Oh, look, I think that cohesive cross-functional approach is critical, right? It brings together that collective excellence. It brings the diverse ways of thinking and takes everyone on the journey. I think you have to have that and get the privacy, the compliance, the security teams on board. Often there is an aspect of education too. Like we're assuming here that risk people fully understand the risks around data and AI. Having a risk
Oh
background
no, they
myself.
don't. No, they don't, because I did the first draft of my AI risk register and sent it off to them, and they were like, "Oh my God, we didn't understand this. We didn't know this." I
Which
was
is so
like,
spot
"Yeah,
on. And
it's
that's the
so
thing is like,
scary."
yeah, like I've presented at formal risk events like ISACA events, and I remember having a room full of senior CROs, executives, and senior leaders. And I made the comment, data people don't always understand risk, and risk people don't always understand data and its risks. And they looked at me funny with like very kind of furrowed eyebrows, and then they thought about it and went, fair enough. The majority of them started nodding when they really thought through it. So again, is like, what can be done? So the exercise and strategically going, let's get an understanding of people's understanding of data and AI and the relevant risks around it, and how you can then translate that into a roadmap is so critical.
Yeah, just the other day I was talking with somebody, and you know how we always talk about the pyramid, or I usually visualize it as a pyramid, from data at the bottom right up to information and knowledge. And I was thinking most normal people haven't thought about that. So that is a really important thing to explain to people in this sort of baseline education, so everybody understands that we take things as data items, but they get turned into information and knowledge that we use. And when you work in the data world, you kind of assume that's baseline knowledge for everybody, but it's not.
No, it isn't. It's look, and that's a challenge again, like flipping on its head. Data people struggle to understand the outcomes of what they're doing quite often. And it comes down to us leaders to really drive that through in the sense that, look, these are the outcomes that we're looking for, aligned to the strategy, aligned to our objectives at the end of the day, and communicate that to our people. Every single analysis that is done should generally be aligned to the policy or the strategy of the organization. And if it isn't, you're just doing it for fun, essentially. but it has to have a
But
clear outcome to business outcome.
realistically, I need to sort of pull this out because I think it's an important thing. Some earlier conversations that I was having today were, about people who do the same thing every day and have done it for 10 years and don't question it. And so if you're a normal worker, you're just turning up, doing your job, and you're not making sure that what you're doing has line of sight. So this actually comes back to the organizational leadership and managers of making sure that they've got KPIs for their individual team members that can join up right up to the overall strategy. And that very rarely happens.
Agree. So I've worked in mature organizations in the past. From the work that I do, doing maturity assessments across, like having done those in data strategies for almost a dozen companies now, most have a very low level of maturity. They say they're data driven, but what does data driven even mean? And you see it in their maturity. And what it comes down to at the end of the day is, well, without data, you just have an opinion. And if you have an opinion that doesn't matter because it's not aligned to the strategy,
And you know what
then,
they say about opinions?
yeah,
Everyone's got one.
Exactly. We won't get too rude with one of those, but yeah, you're spot on. So I agree. There has to be the formal process, working with people and top down, right? You have your high level organizational objectives, KPIs, and targets, and how those flow through to each and every team, and how you articulate the why. So critical. And if you've never had a chance, watch Simon Sinek in the Golden Circles, and literally going, why are we doing this? What is the outcome we are going to make for our communities, for our people at the end of the day? And leaders are so busy, I know, but we should take the time to communicate and explain to our people why we're doing a certain analysis and actually what the outcomes at the end of the day are going to make on the organization, our employees, and our communities. And that's what I think, that leadership and that tone at the top is so critical.
One of the interesting things, I just had my data and AI strategy approved by our board, and
Congrats.
it was really, really an interesting process. But the board were really good. And the one question they asked was, how is this going to impact on our customers? How will this be realized so that they will have a better experience? And I was like, there is a slide about that. And and I was able to sort of say these are the kind of things that we will do that. But that kind of actually has a permeating. That's the vision for a couple of years. That has an impact on how we do work across the organisation. So I've started thinking about how, and talking with my colleagues about, well, how is this going to impact on work? What are we going to do, and how are we going to do it? So we've developed an AI workforce impact assessment to try and start to tease those things out. And that's something that you and I were sort of chatting about earlier, isn't it? So did you want to talk about what you're thinking on that?
Oh, look, I think that's fantastic. And look, it's aligned very closely to the concept I talked about around a focus on the customer experience and then also ensuring the employee experience, that two-pronged approach. It's all about the people and your people internally too. And I think that is critical. It's interesting that you're talking about doing an assessment, understanding the impact and so on to your teams. Because see, interestingly enough, we talked about strategy, but like from a people standpoint, for those of you who don't know, I come from a professional services background. And, but professional services, no matter what some of the challenges they face into, they have some of the most robust, structured pathways for learning and development, education, and capability uplift that, in my 10 years in professional services, I've always taken away and adopted in every organization, essentially doing what you're doing and looking at the assessment of people's capabilities and going, hey, look, we can see we've got some challenges here, we have some gaps here, but what are you doing in your hiring process, in your redeployment processes, moving people around your team? But also, I think we need to move away from where leaders go, like if someone leaves us, that's a bad thing, in the sense that as a leader, I've always gone, hey, look, if we have people that accelerate their performance and actually we help place them into another organization, and government's perfect for that. We go, great, there's an opportunity to move you into another department division where we think you'll have really good impact. It is us as leaders doing that assessment, kind of mapping out the capability and going, look, based on that, where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? And also gaps as a leader. I think it's so important as a leader. I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything, but I, at the very minimum, know where my gaps are, and I hire and have people who complement my gaps and help cover those gaps. And then we all win as a team at the end of the day.
I think we're going to need to start to look at our competency frameworks and start to work out where AI plays into them.
Great.
And that's why I like those 3 personas that I mentioned in that UK report, because it helps us categorize them for, like if you're thinking about different roles. So, waiters, they probably won't have to have much education in AI, but AI will still impact their work. I think the scheduling of their work, the bookings will all be done by AI. A lot of restaurants have robots now. Robots may be helping them. I was at one in Melbourne the other day that had robots helping. Yeah. So, that's a future, that is the intersection of robotics and AI. So there's even those roles that you would think, like a waiter, that's a physical job that needs people, but increasingly there is technology that is playing into that. So I think it's really important to start to go through all the competencies and start to look at where AI will augment the people. There are some things that it's going to replace people for and other things. So how do we work those things out? And to have something that can be seen as fair and systematic. So it's not just random whim of whoever your manager is, just saying this person, they're gone because we don't. But on the other hand, then we've got all the banks that, fired all those people and said it was because of AI, but it was really because they wanted to shift jobs to, allegedly because they wanted to shift jobs to cheaper jurisdictions.
And that's unfortunate. And that comes back to what I mentioned earlier is, does this align to the board's ethical values and transparency at the end of the day? It is challenging. I think it's better off just being completely transparent. And actually, I think, as I mentioned right at the start, is wouldn't you have been better off redeploying a number of those people into other roles where their sort of decades of institutional knowledge would be critical, where it's essentially potentially lost. And then you actually enhance those people with AI. That's my strong view, right? If they enhance people with AI, can you imagine what kind of outcomes you would have had at the end of the day? Here's another interesting, but I haven't really seen anyone comment on it, and it's from a macro standpoint. Now, we have heard in the news right now that there's been a 24% drop in graduate recruitment in a number of countries, right? But generally, the trend is graduate recruitment numbers are going down. I sort of I take a longer term view of that. And because I speak from this angle, because I have always contributed to universities in my working career in 20 years, in sort of everything from, helping on accreditation boards for the universities to providing guidance to universities on, hey, look, this is how you have future ready graduates. Now, the interesting thing here is from a macro standpoint, and again, aligned to your capability, I feel the approach being taken by organizations is short-sighted because, again, if I look at some of these students that when I've gone to these universities, I talk to them, they are digital data and AI savvy, more to the extent, like more than I am. And I'm in this space, right?
Yeah.
But from a macro standpoint, what happens in 10 to 20 years with the underinvestment in graduates who are data and AI savvy?
Well, this goes back to the thing that I was talking about right at the start, is we need to do things that are aligned with the good of society and the economy. And the thing is, how do you get people like us in 10, 20 years if you don't get any grads?
Where's the person in the loop for AI? Who's the subject matter expert to hold AI to account? No, we'll all be 20 years. Yeah, I'll probably be retired, but who's going to be there? So I think it is from a macro standpoint and a senior leadership standpoint. I think it's an oversight and it's very much a short-term and short-sighted view at the end of the day. Now, what else? If you also think of it, and we touched upon it just before, the gray wave of retirement. You think of the baby boomers, the largest chunk of them are going to be retiring in 2024 to 2027. We need to keep the pipeline going and
Some of
invest
them will
today for
come
tomorrow.
back, you know that.
Yeah, well, probably. I know. I'll probably come back. But, if you're hiring digital and AI savvy students now, guess what? You're going to have huge productivity boosts instead of trying to train people. And actually, the amount I've learned from my grads when I'd hired them, they're like, Gladwin, actually, there's a better way of doing things. I'm like, whoa, it's like cross pollination. So even in your capability assessment in that framework, you'd be thinking like, if we get digital and data and AI savvy people on board, now incentivize them, give them that, and people with growth mindsets, give them the opportunity to share and enrich and pollinate the wider organization. I think that's something that's not often tapped upon with people when they're thinking of their strategies and doing these assessments. It's just looking at black and white.
So what you're really saying is that organizations need to have a slightly different lens for what they are doing than just the bottom line.
I 100% agree. While it might help the bottom line in the short term, I think the long term, and if you're having a really long-term view of the organization as a CEO and a board, you need to be considering these things. And I don't think people have. I've not talked to anyone else who's gone straight out, hey, look, what happens in that 10 to 20 years? What happens with that pipeline of people if we don't invest in the next generation of people?
Well, and it's an important thing to consider, because this is why you need to consider, this is why what we were talking about the values and strategy of the organization and how it services its customers and how it serves its customers, because we don't call it customer service for no reason. It's really what we do. We do service to people and they give us money in return. And we need to think about the value proposition and the inherent that we make to our customers. And, there's many organizations, you can think of all the call centers you've ever dealt with that say, oh, your call is important to us, but you're on hold for an hour. Well,
Well,
it's obviously not important to you.
yeah, you're spot on. It's funny because I don't know, has anyone else noticed the pattern that ever since COVID, they never changed their message, which it goes, we're experiencing an unexpected high volume. We'll be with you, in touch with you shortly. I tried sort of contacting my superannuation company the other day, and they thankfully actually gave me an amount of time. I had to wait 50 minutes. I gave up. All right. So it's just like potentially that's an opportunity for AI because it was a straightforward opportunity to help and would have helped. But, like customer service, really, were they really interested in customer service if you have to wait 50 minutes?
Having worked for many banks and, even last century, we were looking for ways to cut costs and cut service, like to do the barest minimum that we could to keep the customers on. But, so I think it's going to really depend on the organization. So some organizations are so focused on profit and keep maximizing their profits that they will keep doing that. But for the majority of organizations, I think they really need to think about their overall corporate mission and then how AI can help them and then how their workforce can help them. And then how do you put AI and your workforce together to really empower them to deliver for the customer? That seems to me to be the right way to think about it.
100%, Kate. Look, people deliver outcomes at the end of the day for people. And of course, they're tech enhanced and tech enabled. But here's another thing. If we step back, right now, there is, again, back to the macro view of things, there's so much focus on Australians' productivity and it's stagnating. But
It's going
here's an
backwards.
interesting,
It's
Here's an
literally going
interesting question.
backwards.
If AI is used to lay people off, either due to the huge overruns and cost savings due to the overinvestment and failures, or AI is directly being used to replace people, when unemployment numbers go up, how does that impact GDP numbers and productivity?
Oh, well, so the Reserve Bank would quite like the unemployment numbers to go up a bit. So I don't think they'd cry. And everybody would then cheer because rates would go down.
But if people are losing their jobs, you
Yeah,
don't have
RBA
money
doesn't.
to pay for your mortgage.
Yeah, but RBA, they want the job numbers to go down. This is how they view it.
Oh, look, I think, there's a certain aspect of that. But if you're looking at the quantity of layoffs through AI in some of the foreign jurisdictions and countries, significant numbers, that continues tracking along. And like we said, the ethical values of boards or government organizations don't align, and we keep going on this trajectory of laying people off due to AI, we'll
Well,
lose whatever productivity numbers we gain.
the thing is, though, that I think a lot of the layoffs, particularly in the US, have actually been to fund AI, not because
Yes.
of AI. So people haven't had their jobs replaced
Mhm.
due to AI. They've just been taken out of the workforce to pay for all the capital expenditure for AI. And I think these companies don't have a clear pathway to ROI for those capital investments they're making in AI. So I think the whole thing in the US is completely bonkers.
Yeah, look, and it's really
But
unfortunate, right?
so much in the US is completely bonkers. So these
Oh,
days
look, it
for me,
is. It's an interesting one. I've got close friends and data executives in US, and it's a challenging time, right? I think you're right. There's an aspect of, look, we need to keep investing in AI. Let's lay people off. There's also an aspect of, we haven't gotten an ROI from AI yet, so let's lay people off. And then there's that small bucket of, look, AI is actually replacing people. Let's lay people off, right? So it's a
it's
three-pronged
all of the
approach.
above. Yeah.
All of the above,
But but
which
but
is challenging.
the interesting thing for me is how many people have done proofs of concept that appear to have not had any focus on traditional measures for projects like ROI. Crazy thing, we want to do this because it's going to make us some money or save us some money. They're the traditional reasons for doing stuff, and they just seem to have plonked them out there, and they're not giving them any benefits. And a lot of them haven't progressed to production, full-scale production. And I think this is a real challenge. People are treating AI as if it's not a normal project, if it's not a normal technology, and it's not being subject to the same rigors that we put normal projects under.
Yeah, look, there's so many different foundational challenges too. Because organizations have generally found data governance, you mentioned the word data governance and people's eyes roll back. It's not a glorious concept, but they've
It needs a
underinvested in
rebrand.
data governance. They've underinvested in data capability, and that just makes it challenging. So when you go to a more advanced tool, you're just not ready for it. If I use the analogy of, look, you haven't even figured out and don't even have your driver's license to be able to drive a normal 1.3 liter vehicle on the roads. You don't know the road rules, and you're given something like a Ferrari. How is that going to work out for you? And if I use that analogy, I kind of feel that you didn't get your data capabilities right, your data governance capabilities right, and the garbage in, garbage out. And those the thought leadership I was quoted on, which still, and this is back in 2018 or 2019, where I was quoted, and it holds so true before generative AI came about, which was, look, if you didn't invest in your sort of data quality and it broke your sort of predictive analytics models and your analysis, and it was expensive then, when you implement AI, and I was talking about machine learning back then, and AI, it's going to break your outcomes at the end of the day quicker and more expensively. And, and that has really come back to haunt people, that statement I made, because it is so true. So you have to
And
invest in your
I think you're right.
capability, understanding. People need to understand the data risks. People need to understand why governance is important. And people have to have the data capabilities up to a certain threshold to then be able to go, great, we can use AI.
Mm. And I think that there's, like, it's something that I often talk about in some of the courses that I teach about AI, about you need to understand what you're talking about with AI. Are you building AI yourself? Then you've got to absolutely have all of that lined up. If you're just turning on a product like Microsoft 365 Copilot, you're probably okay to just turn that on without much. But once you are trying to do anything more meaningful and custom to support your business, you absolutely need to have all of that data governance, data quality, and data management
Security,
sorted.
privacy, people understanding, look, no matter what, don't dump highly confidential information into Copilot no matter what, even within the organization, for example, right? You wouldn't be ideally not uploading, and look, hopefully the guardrails in place and so on, but you don't want to be uploading people's contracts and so on, just in case there's leakage across the organization. Last thing you want is
Well,
someone going Copilot going, hey, what's the pay of the CEO? Or
so
pay
there was a hardware company that I know very well in late 2023, and they did a Copilot pilot. And a friend rang me and said, "We're doing a Copilot pilot," and I was like, "Oh, let me how it goes." And then 3 weeks later, he called me and said, "Oh, we've cancelled that." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, somebody surfaced a spreadsheet that had everybody's bonus in it, which put the cat among the pigeons." And they cancelled that. And I was talking to the folks in Microsoft about this at a conference early in 2024, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're just assuming everybody's got their information governance sorted. Like, we've just turned it on. Like, you've got your information governance sorted, haven't you?" And I was like, "Oh, really?"
and it's like, look, I think that is the bit of the challenge, and it's just the large tech companies are not liable. If you read the terms and conditions, they're not liable if you don't have the proper data governance in place and guardrails and so on. They go, you should have that. We've provided you, each of the technology companies have put out huge amounts of information around responsible AI, guardrails, etc. Whether people look at them is another thing, but you should be. Privacy, security, all of these things by design. Education and capability uplift is more important than ever.
Well, things like privacy by design, which has been part of GDPR in Europe for a decade now. And for the most part, I've not seen it in the wild here in Australia, very rarely anyway. And the same with security by design, which is even older.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's how do you then, if you sit back into your framework that you're talking about, how do you weave in the privacy by design, security by design, bake that into people's roles and responsibilities? And then as leaders, as mentors at the end of the day, help enable that. And then we're holding people to account. And also
Well,
creating a culture, mind you, again, because I have a security background, is that people feel safe to come forward if they've made a mistake. And I think that's critical, right? Is you want to set up an environment as a leader. And, when I was responsible for security at a previous organization as the CIO, I set up an environment where people could go, hey, look, Gladwin, I kind of made a mistake. I've sent this out. And you can set up that environment so you can go, thank you for telling me timely, because we can immediately do something about it and put in place controls and share this information, communicate it. Again, I talked about communication, change management, a look where we can put in automated controls around data and access and so on, privacy by design, security by design, put in controls where possible, and then ensure that people are educated. And we went and updated our education then for the next annual review and e-learnings to ensure that we incorporated that to manage those data risks and the leakage risk. And look, even more so now, you can just upload a potential file into Copilot and ask it to analyze it. Now, what preventative controls are you going to put in place and look, there are tools out there that will go scan the document and go, look, this looks like it's potentially highly confidential, and refuse to accept the file.
Yeah.
And if you're in government, for example, you cannot put anything that's protected and above in any AI platform, from my understanding.
Yeah. So, you can put all of those preventative controls in place, but they only work for certain circumstances. At the end of the day, you've got to rely on your people and their
Exactly.
judgment, and they need to know this stuff. One of the big problems we had when I used to work at the uni as CDO was the sheer amount of training that people were required. And then we suddenly said, oh, we now need AI training on top of the cybersecurity training, the workplace health and safety training, all of the different kinds of training. And it was just like, oh my God, no one's going to remember any of this. So it's an interesting challenge of and I don't think anyone's got the solution of how can you deliver just-in-time training? Like, I can see you're about to do something that might be slightly risky. Do you want to just do this? Have a look at this? So, almost that kind of intervention thing.
Well, potentially that's exactly where AI could be the most powerful. There's literally been, in the last couple of days, released that Claude as a large language model tool is being used actively for cybercrime. So guess what? The bad guys are using it for crime. We should be using the platform too to protect our people. So potentially exactly what you're saying, that's the opportunity, and it's low risk that, hey, look, someone's about to make a mistake. You also have your security controls in place, and then you just have a large language model jump and go, hey, it looks like you're about to do this. Maybe that's not the best idea. And this is why I think that might be a great business for you and I to get into, Kate.
Hey, last year I spoke at a cyber conference about how AI can be attacked. And to demonstrate it, I showed how attackers can research your organization using Gen AI. And in 10 minutes, I had detailed information about a particular organization's network, its organizational executive, who the decision makers were, an org chart, a network diagram, an affinity diagram. Like, it gave me and I was like doing it and just showing them, here, let me just put this in. And it would just, so the attackers are using AI already. And that kind of information gathering from a bad actor would have taken weeks and weeks and weeks. And I did it in 10 minutes live in front of people. And the technology's even moved on since last year a great deal. Have you had a look at Kimi too?
I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance yet.
You've got to go and have a look at it. It's quite interesting. It's really remarkable, and it's a totally different approach to a lot of the big American companies. So I think it's basically undercut what OpenAI is doing.
Interesting.
So really
that's the thing, is we also have to take into account the emergence of other models like DeepSeek, like Kimi 2, and so on. And they're accelerating their activities, and interestingly enough, almost outdoing the Western world, right? They're catching up really quickly. You just have to look at, for example, EVs and the technologies. You look at, holy smoke, I looked at the recent release from Xpeng with their iron robots, and I saw it and I was like, there's a person in a suit. There's no way that's a robot. And then they actually proceeded to cut open the covering and show people that it wasn't. So, there has to be the consideration from a data AI standpoint on the emergence through Eastern countries. And look, I think we have to work through that. I don't have the answers for it, but I think the sleeping giant's waking up, and we need to account for that.
Yeah. Well, that's been a really interesting chat. Thanks, Gladwin.
You're welcome.
Time to draw this to a close. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and hopefully you'll come back again.
Will do. Always glad to join anytime, Kate. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.